Hey everybody, and welcome to A Maker's Pilgrimage. I'm Aidan, the knitting monk, and I'm coming to you from the beautiful Hudson Valley, where I am a brother at Holy Cross Monastery. Welcome back to those of you who are joining me again and who have watched the podcast before, and also welcome to those of you who are here for the very first time. I hope you enjoy what you see and hear. And if you do, I hope you'll hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up as well. And thank you to all of you who have already subscribed. I really, as I've said before, I'm so grateful for this community and for all of the, not just the subscribers, but the comments and the emails that I get. I just really love connecting with other folks around making, knitting, sewing, crocheting, spinning, quilting. Even though I don't do those things, I'm still happy to connect around the whole kind of enterprise of making. So it has been a while since I have recorded. I think I didn't count, but I think it's been about 6 weeks since I recorded. And in the meantime, I have been in the UK for 3 weeks. I led my pilgrimage group for 2 weeks through Wales, Northern England, and Scotland. And then I flew to Ireland and went to Glendalough, which is just south of Dublin, for a week's retreat on my own, and survived the Irish hurricane there, while my Instagram buddy Kate, who is also in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, was near where I live. So, and that was also during Sheep and Wool, which unfortunately I had to miss this year. And then I went to London for a day and flew back. So I've been really, really busy, but I'm glad I could grab a little time this afternoon to get this recorded. And more on the pilgrimage later, but I want to jump right into the knitting as well. I was on a trip, so I didn't have that much time to knit, not as much as I normally would. But I have still managed to knit quite a bit. In 6 weeks, you get a lot. You get a lot knit. So unfortunately, two finished objects I've already sent off to their forever homes. So I don't have them physically with me to show you. But I'll tell you a little bit about them, and I'll insert a picture after the description of them. So the first thing is The World's Simplest Mittens by Tin Can Knits, and I'll put a picture here for you. So this is a free pattern on Ravelry, and they really are the easiest mittens you could possibly knit. I mean, it's all stockinette stitch. The only thing you have to know how to do is increase and decrease. Very, very simple. So I made these actually in the middle of the hurricane, and it took me, a day maybe to make a day of knitting time to make this pair of mittens. They are knit in the Fiber Company Aran Moore yarn, which is an Aran weight yarn. This pattern is wonderful though because it is written for any weight yarn that you want to use. Though surprisingly not actually for Aran weight. It goes from worsted to chunky, so I cast on it for a worsted weight and it just ended up being slightly bigger, but that's fine. There's not a lot to say about these mittens really, they're just very straightforward mittens. The yarn itself is really lovely. It's very tweedy. I forget exactly what the percentages are, but it's a combination of merino, cashmere, and silk. It's normally very expensive, like $30 a skein or something, but I found this yarn on eBay. This is something I'm really proud of. Found this yarn on eBay for $5. So I paid $5 plus maybe $2 shipping for a skein of this yarn. And it came in literally like an hour before I left the monastery to head out to the UK. So I managed to shove it down into my suitcase, and I'm glad I did because I used it on my trip. So I love those mittens. They're very soft, very simple mittens. The next finished object that I have actually is the Far Hills hat. This is by Jared Flood, and it's from his book Woolens, and I'll put a picture of that here as well. So this hat I knit in yarn that I picked up in Scotland, and it's called The Croft by West Yorkshire Spinners. I forget what the colorway is on this one, but it will be on my in the show notes. Because I have it on my Ravelry page. But this yarn is 100% Shetland wool, and it's Aran weight. And I found it in a yarn shop in the UK, and it is so beautiful. It's you can I don't think you can really tell from the picture that it's kind of very slightly speckled or variegated. And they had a whole bunch of colors in this yarn, which I'd never seen in the US. So I bought 4 different skeins of it because it was also really inexpensive, like £8.50 for a full skein of yarn, which is still only about $10. I have found out actually that Webb's sells this yarn, so I will probably order some more, but it's a little more expensive through Webb's than it was when I was there. Um, but anyway, it blocks out so soft, and it has a slight kind of shine. It's a little bit like BFL actually in that respect. It has not quite as shiny as a BFL, but like a little bit of shine to it. Um, and so this pattern was wonderful. Very, you know, it took a little bit of getting used to this cable work because you have knit one, you have a sort of a line of knit stitches, and then a seed stitch, and then another line of knit stitches, and then a purl stitch, and then you repeat that 3, and you're sort of crossing those sets of 3s around the purl stitch. Um, so I would say after, a good 1 or 2 repeats of the pattern, I wasn't really checking the chart anymore, but then there are also decreases thrown in pretty early on in the chart. So, you know, it required paying attention, but it was not a super hard knit. And then, of course, to avoid the Jared Flood hole on the top of the hat, which I have talked about probably in every episode of this podcast now, I did a round of knit 2 together, slip, slip, knit, and then a round of knit 2 together to get down from something like 24 stitches to, I think it was 8 stitches, because he wanted you to leave 24 stitches and kind of sew those together, and I thought, oh, so I've learned. I love Jared Flood's hat patterns, but he always leaves that little hole at the top, and it drives me crazy. So eventually I'll just stop telling you about the hole, but at the moment, so anyway. Now, with this hat, and with the first work in progress I'm going to show you, I have to do a little bit of eating crow, because if you watched the episode on cabling, where I give you my philosophy of cables, you may remember me making a pronouncement of the sort that said that you shouldn't knit cables in anything but a solid or a tonal yarn, that speckles or variegation really, or self-striping would really detract from the cables. Now, of course, whenever you make a pronouncement, you end up being wrong. And this hat is my example of that. The hat is very subtly speckled, with these kind of light grayish lavender speckles on it. And I think it looks wonderful. So, I'm eating humble pie. I'm saying that I was wrong. Now, that's a very subtle example. I'm going to show you a sock that I've knit, a cabled sock that is more speckled. In fact, I'll go ahead and jump to that, even though it is a work in progress, and I have one more finished object to show you, but, who's keeping track of these things? So this is a sock that I just finished this morning, and you can see these beautiful kind of double cables on it. The pattern is called Fidelio, and it's by something coffee. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. This person, whoever they are, has created like 30 really beautiful, mostly cabled sock patterns, and they're all free on Ravelry. Um, so this yarn that I knit this sock in is old rusted chair in their sock base, which I think is 2 or 3, maybe 3 ply, 100% superwash merino, and the color is a kind of magic. I have really wanted to try old rusted chair for a long time, and well, a long time, 6 months or so. And my FiberShare buddy, when I came back from the UK, I had my FiberShare package waiting for me, and she had bought me a skein of old rusted chair in a kind of magic, which, even though I didn't say this in my FiberShare notes, was the colorway I most wanted to use of theirs. So I was so excited when I got home. I had to cast on this yarn, this sock immediately. And I've also wanted to knit this pattern for a while. I tried it about 18 months ago, and the pattern, because you'll see these kind of double cables right here. So for like 8 rows, you're doing that double cable. And then you have 8 rows that's a 2x2 knitting, 2x2 ribbing. And that actually makes the sock very tight. So this sock has 80 stitches in the round. Well, when I tried to make this sock a year and a half ago, I cast on a number 1 needle, and it was just too tight for me. But you really have to cast on 80 stitches, or I think 72 if you want the smaller size, but I knew the smaller size wasn't going to work. So I went up to a size 2 needle, and I'm so glad I did, because this sock fits better than any sock I have ever made myself. And that tells me 2 things. Number 1, it tells me that I'm knitting my socks too tight most of the time, and I need to either go up a needle size, which is what I think I'm going to do. Try a size 2 needle. I normally knit socks on a size 1 needle. The other thing is, and I usually do a heel flap and gusset. Not usually, I always do a heel flap and gusset. But this is about 3 inches of heel flap, and I normally do about 2 inches of heel flap. And it makes such a huge difference for me, because, not that you need this much detailed information about my feet, but I have a very high arch on my foot. So from the base of the heel to where my ankle joins my foot is really about 3 inches. And so that my socks have not been as comfortable as they could be. So now I'm definitely going to use this kind of formula for my socks from now on. It's like amazing to learn something new about sock knitting. Not that there's not plenty about sock knitting I don't know, but I've been knitting socks for a few years now, so I'm really glad to be correcting those fit problems finally. And now all I want to do is knit socks. So that's the first, and now I have to knit a second sock, which I'm excited about. And the pattern is written so that the cables will mirror from foot to foot. It's not exactly the same cable pattern for both feet. I'm going to jump backwards to one more finished object now. Oh, but anyway, no, sorry. The other thing I wanted to say was, so clearly this is an even more vibrantly speckled colorway, and I knit cables in it. And I think it looks wonderful. Now, do the speckles detract from the cable work a little bit? Yeah, they do. They do. If I'd knit this in a solid color, the cables would be more obvious. I don't care. I'm obsessed with this sock right now, so I don't care. And that's all to say, you can be wrong sometimes, and that's fine. And also that it doesn't really matter if it's the most kind of perfect combination as long as you like it, and I do. So continuing the sock theme, I made this very tweedy pair of vanilla socks when I was in Ireland. Um, and this, I mean, it's just a plain vanilla sock, stockinette, heel flap and gusset. Um, what is different about this is also the Croft yarn, and toe is the Aranmore by the Fiber Company. So this is an Aran weight sock. Now, when I bought this yarn in the skein, something about it just screamed socks to me. I don't know why. I just looked at it and I said, I have to make socks from that. I'd never made an Aran weight sock, so it was a little bit of an experiment for me. I will adjust this pattern next time. I ended up casting on 40 stitches, and next time on a number 5 needle. Next time I'm going to cast on 44 stitches on a number 6 needle, because this sock is a little too tight right around the top of my foot, like where kind of the ankle and the foot come together, that extra wide place. It's a little too tight for me there. But the beautiful thing about an Aran weight sock is that it flies off the needles. I mean, like, I knit the second sock on the airplane, an 8-hour flight, I was done. No problem with that sock. So I will definitely be making some more Aran weight socks, particularly as winter is here and it is freezing in our church all through the winter. So I want my feet to stay nice and warm. So the other thing about these socks is that they are not perfectly matching. As you can see here, I played a game of Yarn Chicken and I lost. One skein of this Croft yarn does not have quite enough in it for me to make a full pair of socks for myself, because I like a longer cuff, and so I just couldn't get quite to the end, and I thought, am I going to buy a whole second skein of yarn for an inch, even less than that, 3/4 of an inch of the foot? And I decided, no, I'm not. Who cares? So you'll see they don't exactly match up. There is a little bit of a difference on them, and that's all right with me. So there you have it. And actually, I had not knit socks in a while until I knit these socks, and I really got my sock knitting mojo back with them. So I blew through this pair. I have another sock to show you that I finished. I just finished this sock this morning, and I have to make the second one for that. I have more Aran weight socks I want to make. I have other sock yarn in my stash I want to use. So you're going to be seeing some more socks in the near future. Socks coming to you. The other sock that I made is this one, which you may remember from a few episodes ago. I had about this much of it. I finished this on my trip. That's really more the color right there. Again, it's just a plain vanilla sock with the gusset and heel flap and gusset. This is Storyteller sock yarn from Knits and Knots Tahoe. And this was a color called Taffy Island, which was in the Knit Crate box, like I think it was in July or something. And I really wanted this sock yarn to work for me, but these just are not my colors. So much so that even though this is a gift sock, this is going to be for my mom for Christmas, I really didn't even want to knit on this sock because something about the colors, I just don't like them very much. And I think my mom will really like them. So, it doesn't matter if I like them because they're not for me, but it turns out that I don't really want to knit with colors I don't like. So that's something good to learn about myself and to move past, at least for this sock. Because I have to make a second one. Okay, you can't do much with one sock. But here's just an aside for a moment. I mean, here's the thing about socks. I am so selfish in my sock knitting because socks are, in my mind, they're in that category of things that are quick knits because they take less than 2 weeks to make. But they're a lot of work. They're like the most work of any quick knit. Because a hat, you're just done. 3 days, you're done. A pair of socks, even vanilla socks, in fingering weight yarn, they take a lot of knitting to make. I think I sort of calculated, the first time I ever made socks. There was something like 80,000 stitches that went into a pair of socks. That's a lot of stitches. Now, if you turn that into a cabled sock or a lace sock, then that's even more work. So I would actually rather make sweaters for people than socks, because at least then it feels like I know I'm getting into a big project for somebody. And you give somebody a pair of hand knit socks, and it's not that of course they like them, and they're appreciative for getting something hand knit, but I don't think they really understand, unless they're a knitter, that a sock is actually a lot of work. If you give them a sweater, they get it, that that's a lot of work. So I've knit, most of the sweaters I've knit have been for other people, but I've only knit of probably 20 or 30 pairs of socks, maybe not 30, 20 or so pairs of socks. I've only knit 3 that I gave to other people. Two that I deliberately knit for other people, 1 that I knit for myself and gave to another person, and then this one that I'm working on. So there's my dirty little secret. I don't like knitting socks for other people. I'm very selfish about my sock knitting. So yeah, and I decided to record this podcast on the spur of the moment. So of course I've gotten things all out of order. So I just found another finished object to show you. But that's all right. This was actually the first object I finished on my travels, and this is the skiff hat. This is also by my favorite Mr. Jared Flood, and again, of course, I don't even have to tell you, but I fixed that problem. The problem that shall not be named with the hats. This hat is, I knit this in Brooklyn Tweed Arbor, in the colorway Dorado, and what happened with this was I had ordered, I think, like 18 skeins of this yarn, and for a cabled sweater project, and I ended up making a very simple raglan pullover for myself. So I've had a lot of the yarn left over. So this is the last bit of it, though. And the wonderful thing about this hat, this is the 3rd time I've made this hat. It's written for worsted weight yarn, and the first time I made it, it was enormous. And all of the notes on Ravelry talk about how enormous this hat is. So Arbor is a DK weight yarn, and so I followed the pattern exactly as written, but with a DK weight yarn, and it's perfect. It's actually even a little big. You'll see, I'll put it on here. See, I mean, it's meant to have this oversized brim. That's on purpose. But even so, it's still a little bit loose up top there. You can see all that, I could fold it back if I wanted it to be tight. So I think it's pretty perfect, but it's still a big hat. And this is a gift, actually, for one of our brothers who's about to become a novice. So I knit this for him, for a gift for when he becomes a novice, which means he becomes a member of the community. I wore it all day on Lindisfarne, right when I had finished it. I finished it that morning, so I wore it all day on Lindisfarne as a kind of blessing, so that place would sink into it. So that's my last finished object. Now, I have something that's actually not very exciting to show you, but it is on the list, so I will show you. I also am in the process of making the Melanie Berg's shawl called The Girl in Me. I don't have a lot to show you for it right now. It's a triangular shawl, and there's a kind of slip stitch colorwork mosaic on the bottom. It's really beautiful. But as you can see, I am in the never ending garter section before you get to the colorwork. So it's not very exciting at the moment, but it will eventually be a really beautiful shawl. And this is also Shetland, fingering weight, 100% Shetland wool from Harrisville Designs. And it's actually in these cones here, 900 yards to a cone that somebody gave me. And the garter part is going to be in this charcoal gray, and then there's kind of this see if I can, that's really more like sort of a pinky lavender for the colorwork mosaic. I'm not sure. I was going to keep this shawl for myself because I need something like that, lightweight, that I can wrap around myself. And I love the colors. But I'm going to show you some yarn that I got in the UK to make a shawl for myself, and I don't really need a lot of shawls, so I need one shawl. I don't need 4 shawls or 2 shawls. So anyway, that will come along. You'll see more of that, but I'm actually going to turn my attention back to the big cabled monster, the Heston pullover. And I'm even going to wait on doing the second sock for these gorgeous cabled socks so that I can jump into that. So hopefully the next time I record one of these episodes, I will have a completed cabled monster. That's my goal. We'll see. But that is it for my knitting right now, and I haven't done any sewing either. So give me just 1 second here. That's water, not gin. It's only 3 in the afternoon. So I want to just tell you a little bit about my trip and some upcoming exciting things going on in my life. And then I do have a thank you giveaway, and then we're going to wrap it up. So we might be done about 45 minutes. That would be great. So my trip to the UK was really wonderful. It was a new experience for me to be leading a pilgrimage. I've been on a pilgrimage before, and leading it is very different. So I realized pretty quickly on in the trip that it was not my pilgrimage the way that it was for the participants on the trip. I had some really beautiful moments, but those were kind of incidental rather than integral to the trip, because I was there as somebody to provide, to help create space for an experience for other people, rather than having my own experience. So I did have some of that. So you'll probably remember from previous episodes, if you've watched it, that we started off in Shrewsbury, and we were there for a few days, and we spent one of those days at Powys Castle in Wales. Powys Castle was one of my favorite stops on the whole trip. And it's not specifically a holy site, but it's an old castle that was then turned into a kind of a more comfortable palace for some, fancy nobleman or something. But what was astonishing there were the gardens. And I spent maybe 15 minutes in the house, and I spent hours in the gardens because they were gorgeous, including 350-year-old yew trees that were planted before the United States was a country. I mean, can you imagine that? I'm sure if you're coming to me from Europe, then yes, you can imagine that. But for an American, that is old. So I jumped the little rope and went inside the kind of canopy of the U so that I could touch it. Because how often do you get to touch a living being that is that old? I mean, that is incredible. Not to mention all the flowers. I mean, there was a lot that was in bloom, and it was just really, it was a religious experience for me. A really beautiful place, and the sun was out, and I mean, gorgeous. Um, then some other highlights from the trip. I mean, we went to a bunch of places, but these are the places that I found really exciting. Um, the other, probably the biggest highlight of the trip for me was Lindisfarne. Not surprising, I suppose, because um, I took the name Aiden when I made my monastic profession, and that is the community that Saint Aidan founded, was on Lindisfarne. And I won't tell you the whole story of Saint Aidan. I think I told it in the last episode, um, but this on Lindisfarne now they have the buildings I think are from the 900s, which is after Aidan. Aidan was 7th century, like I think he died in 650 something. Um, so this was a later, kind of the later manifestation of his community, had built these stone structures, and at the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII, they were let go, and they've fallen into ruins now. But we celebrated Eucharist in the East End of the old monastic church there. And it was just so beautiful because, again, it was a really sunny day. And this church was all grass, and then these crumbling walls, but the arches were still intact, and this beautiful blue sky, and it really, we were in a lot of ruins on the trip, actually, and it just made me wonder, like, what if our churches were all open to the sky like this? How would our sense of God and spirituality and faith be different if we were in closer communion with the natural world like that? So that's a dream of my heart, is to be in closer communion with the natural world, and I really got to experience that on the trip. Um, we also went to Iona, which frankly was kind of disappointing. Not because of Iona, but because of various reasons. We had about 3 hours on the island. It was really raining very hard that day with a lot of wind, and so we weren't staying on the island. And by the time we got there, they told us that they were probably going to shut down the ferry service early. So we found out when the last ferry was that was going to go out, and we only had 2 or 3 hours there. That was a bummer, and I'm going to have to go back. In fact, I'll tell you in just a moment about my next trip to Iona. And then after that, as I mentioned, I went to Ireland, and I spent a week in Glendalough, south of Dublin. It is a beautiful place. Again, it was like the outdoors that I found so moving there. I stayed in this little stone hermitage, which was charming, and had a wood burning stove, and I just sat there in front of the fire knitting and reading and sitting quietly watching the flames, and it was a really, really, really powerful time for me. Silence, solitude, um, you know, I just want to say, some people will romanticize silence and solitude. It's really hard work. And so the first couple of days that I was there were hard. I was really lonely. All the feelings that you don't have to feel when you're just quiet when you're just busy all the time, then you suddenly, calm down and are quiet, and then everything can come up. But what happens then is, at least for me, is that everything comes up, and then there's kind of a solid foundation that I sink into. So that happened on that retreat, and it was really incredible. And like I said, I made it through the Irish hurricane, the worst hurricane to hit Ireland in 50 years. Of course, hit while I was there. Now, Glendalough is pretty far inland, and much nearer the east coast than the west coast. So we didn't get a lot from the hurricane, just very strong winds. But it was still, a little frightening at times. Um, but then the next day was again a beautiful day, the only sunny day while I was in Ireland, um, and and so I went, took about a 15-minute walk to this nature park where the ruins of St. Kevin's Hermitage are, and his monastic city. And I took a long hike through the Wicklow Mountains. And I got there before the tour buses, so I was the only person there. So, I mean, I was walking through this red, red pine forest next to a glacial lake. And then I came out on the other side and I looked up, and there were these incredible mountains all around me and the water. It was so beautiful. I actually started crying. And no, I mean, I cry a lot, but I think this was actually the first time that I have found a place so beautiful that it moved me to tears. Now that tells me my own heart is softening as well, but also the place was that spectacularly beautiful. Um, and as I continued my walk, there were mountain goats kind of in the path and on the hillside. There were deer, stags, sheep. I mean, lots of wildlife there. And no, it was really, really a just incredible place. Um, and then from Glendalough, a few days after that, I flew to London, and I saw one of my best friends from college, who's a barrister there. And of course, she was in the middle of this very intense case, but she still took time off and took me out for supper. And I went to Kew Gardens. Of course, again, went to the garden, and two knitting shops. And what would you know? But I walked into Loop in London, which everybody had said if you're going to a yarn shop in London, you have to go to Loop. So I made my little pilgrimage out to Loop, which of course is run by Americans. So half of their stock or more is American yarn, um, and because they told me the Brits all want American yarn, and I was there and I wanted British yarn because I was like, I can get quince and Brooklyn tweed and everything at home. But I went up, there's 2 floors there, and I went up to the second floor, and this woman comes up to me and she says, I know you. And I said, you do? Well, it was Karen, who runs the blog Beautiful Knitters, who had done a feature on me back, I think it was over the summer, maybe in June. And of course, I had no idea what she looked like because her blog is not about her. So that was a really great time, and I probably spent about an hour there just talking to her and getting to know her a little bit. It just goes to show you, you run into people all over the place, and our knitting community is so warm and friendly, and I just love it. I really, really love it. This will tell you something of my willpower, though. I managed to leave Loop with nothing in hand. I bought nothing in Loop. And it wasn't because it was all American. I mean, there was a lot of really beautiful yarn there. But I realize more and more as I see a lot of knitting podcasts and photos on Instagram and all this kind of thing, I have a very different philosophy of stash, I think, and I don't buy a lot of yarn. So I managed to get out of the UK with 7 skeins of yarn. Actually, a little bit less than that because I knit up one of the skeins while I was there. So 6 skeins actually came back on the plane with me, and 1 pair of socks. But I didn't buy a lot while I was there, and I don't buy that much yarn. I've been to Sheep and Wool for 2 years now. Well, not this year, but 2 years before that. I didn't buy a single thing either time. So, But again, I'm not making pronouncements because I will prove myself wrong here. And in fact, the last thing I want to show you about my trip was some yarn that I bought. Which you'll notice I don't do a lot of show and tell from my yarn purchases, and that's again partly because I don't buy that much, and um, also because I think there's a little too much emphasis on stash in the knitting community, and I think there are more important things to hear about and talk about most of the time. Um, but that being said, I am going to show you some yarn that I bought. And it's because there's a real story behind this. So I was on Lindisfarne and I saw a big building that said local crafts and artists. And I thought, you never know, there might be some yarn in there. There might be some knitting stuff from the area. So I went in and I found this woman who does all hand spun yarns, British yarns, and then she hand spins them. And so she had some products that she had knit from her own yarn, but she also had some beautiful yarn, and she was so friendly. Her name is Jenny, and she lives, I think, in Yorkshire. Let me see, I'm sure it says on here. Jenny Howe is her name. Jenny Howes. She lives in Scotland, and she spins her yarn on an Ashford traditional spinning wheel in front of a roaring fire or in the garden. Oh my gosh. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So she was so friendly and her yarn was so beautiful. And I was on Lindisfarne, which is a really holy place for me. And so I did buy 3 skeins of her yarn. And I thought, I'm going to use this yarn to make a shawl for myself that I can wear when I pray. And that way it'll be a really, really special thing. So let me see if I don't even know if the colors will show up that well. There's this really like rich dark purple here. And these are all kind of a sport weight. With hand spun, it's not exact, any of it, but, and all Shetland wool, I think. This one is Shetland anyway. And then these two have the purple base in them. This one is Shetland and bamboo. It's kind of a gray, it's not even really showing up well there. That's better. It's kind of like a silvery gray blue yarn. Variegated. And then a purple variegated. Again, the light is not great, so let's see. Yeah, that's a little bit better. So I'm just absolutely in love, and this is the label here. Shows you, and I'll include the information in my show notes as well. So that'll happen at some point, hopefully in the next year. I'll be able to make that for myself. And I'm just, I've already said everything I need to say about it. And I will include all of my social media information, which I realize I normally put at the beginning of the show. I'll include it all at the end. I normally put it in both places, but like I said, this was a spur of the moment thing to be doing this episode. So I just want to tell you. Oh, and I'll also include photos of the pilgrimage trip at the end of the episode. So just a couple of quick things. So I did get the pilgrimage bug while I was there, and I now have 2 more pilgrimages that I'm planning. And I will put, again, in the show notes, I'll put links to information about these in case you're interested. But the first one is going to be in January of 2019, so a year from this coming January. A priest who lives with our community and I are going to be leading a pilgrimage to southern India. So we'll go to the Tamil Nadu province of southern India. We'll fly from New York to Chennai, and we'll be there for 2 weeks. And the point of the trip is really to kind of spend some time immersing ourselves in southern Indian Christianity, which is kind kind of more so than any other strand of Christianity, really blends the Eastern and the Western contemplative traditions. Um, so we'll visit the martyrdom site of Thomas the Apostle, who I have a particular love for, and is in Chennai. And then we're planning to spend 3 days at Ramanam Ashram, which is a Hindu ashram, and then to spend a few days at Shantivanam, which is a Christian ashram, and that's where Bede Griffiths was, who was a really important figure in the interfaith movement, and a contemplative. And then we're hoping to spend 3 days at Kuramsala, which is up in the mountains, and is a Cistercian Christian ashram. And hopefully at some point we'll also get a day in Pondicherry, which is has some really, really beautiful temples, and is supposed to be a gorgeous spot. Um, and because it's in India, where the exchange rate is very good and the prices are very low, we're hoping that it'll be a really affordable trip. Um, and then the second trip is going to be back to the UK, and that I'm going to be leading by myself in May of 2020. I realize these are both may seem really far out there, but it takes this long to start planning a trip like this. So I'm going to take 10 people on that trip, and we're going to fly into Edinburgh and then make our way to Iona. And we're going to spend 3 or 4 days on Iona, probably in silence, certainly in quiet, to try to really take in the experience of being in Iona, or on Iona. And then we're going to go from Iona to Melrose, which is right at the border of Scotland and England. And we're going to pick up St. Cuthbert's Way there, which is a 62-mile walk from Melrose to Lindisfarne. And it's a traditional pilgrim route. And so we're going to walk that entire 62 miles, obviously not in one day, over the course of 5 or 6 days, maybe a week. I haven't quite mapped that out yet. And we're going to stay in beds and breakfasts or small hotels along the way. And then that pilgrim route will take us, we will walk across the causeway to the island of Lindisfarne, and we'll stay on Lindisfarne for 3 or 4 days like we did on Iona, again to really take in the experience of being on Lindisfarne. And then I think from there we're going to go to Durham, where the tomb of St. Cuthbert is. He was a disciple of Aidan, and we're going to spend probably 2 or so days in Durham, and that'll round out our trip. So again, that's also going to be a very, I'm calling it a contemplative immersion, because it's really going to be structured like a 2-week retreat. So there's going to be a lot of silence, morning and evening prayer, daily Eucharist, and a very meditative kind of experience. So if you're interested in finding out more information about those, check the show notes, and I'll have a link to, it's like show notes to a link to a, etc. But you will be able to sign up to receive email updates about that pilgrimage. And that way you can stay informed about it, and then when we're ready to sign up people, if that's something you're interested in, then you can sign up for it. And then of course, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me and ask. 2 other exciting opportunities, actually I'm going to tell you about 3. 3 retreats that I'm leading coming up. 2 of them are knitting related. One of them is not, but the one that's not is in January. The last weekend of January, I'm leading a retreat here at the monastery. That is called Seeking Christ, Our Soul's True Lover. And it's about using our sexuality as a tool in the quest for God. So you can find out, again, more information. I'll direct you in the show notes. And then the 2 knitting related retreats I'm doing, one I'm calling a Maker's Pilgrimage. That's going to be the first week of April. and we're going to explore how this task of making is, again, a tool in the quest for wholeness. And that's going to involve some contemplative Christian spirituality, probably some Jungian theories, and some contemporary philosophy, and then again a lot of practice work. So we're going to have our our crafts with us, and then the last retreat that I have to tell you about is next October, during the New York Sheep and Wool Festival, called Rhinebeck, in the knitting world because it's in Rhinebeck. We have our annual Prayerful Stitches retreat. I'm going to be leading that retreat this year. I don't know exactly what the theme is going to be, but that is Thursday to Sunday, and we spend all day Saturday at the Sheep and Wool Festival. So if you are a regular at the Sheep and Wool Festival and you want to experience it in the context of a retreat, or if you've never been and you've wanted to go and you think you'd enjoy experiencing Rhinebeck in the context of a retreat, I hope you'll consider signing up for that. And again, if you have any questions about any of these, or anything else really for that matter, please let me know. The last two things I have to tell you about, and we are over 45 minutes, but oh well. The last few things, that the next time you see me, I will be both a godfather and a deacon. So it's Friday today, and on Sunday, I will be at the baptism of my new godson, Max, who you may remember I knit the matching sweater for. So we will certainly bomb Instagram with matching sweater pictures in person. But I'm really excited about that. And my ordination is coming up. I will be ordained to the diaconate in the Episcopal Church on Tuesday, the 14th of November at 11 in the morning here at the monastery. And then, God willing, I will be ordained a priest on June 5th of next year. So I am really excited about that. It's been an 11-year process. And I'm finally being ordained. So I'm really, really happy and excited about that. My mom's coming up, and my aunt and uncle as well. So, and then of course our community here, and I've got some friends coming. So it should be a really lovely celebration, and I'm sure I'll have pictures to post, or a video or something in the next episode. That's all the content I have. The only thing left is to say thank you again, and to let you know who the winner of our drawing this week is, and that is Marty Nagy. I hope I said that right. Nagy. No, Marta. Sorry, Marta Nagy. See, I've messed up your name, Marta. But Marta, what you are going to receive is this t-shirt, which is one of our monastery t-shirts, in this kind of heathered pinky red. And let's see if you can see it there. This is calligraphy that one of our brothers did, and it's a line from the rule that our founder wrote for the community. And it says, starting here, it says, "Love must act as light must shine and fire must burn." And then it says Holy Cross Monastery, West Park, New York. And there's the fire right there. So I will send this off to you, Marta, if you will give me your, send me a message, a private message with your mailing address. I will be happy to get this off to you this week. So for those who would like to be included in the future drawings, just a reminder that I draw from the subscriber list. So, but you have to have your subscription be a public subscription, because otherwise I can't see that you have subscribed. So the way you do that is you go to your settings on YouTube, and you click subscriptions, and then you say, it'll ask you if you want your subscriptions to be public, and you say yes, you do want them to be public. And then you'll be included in future drawings because, like I said, I hope to be able to do this every time, and so far I have been. So that is all that I have for you in this update. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up. All of the show notes will be available at the blog site that I use, which is thenittingmonk.wordpress.com. You can find me on Instagram and on Ravelry with the username knittingmonk. And then I also publish a weekly meditation on Christian spirituality, contemplative Christian spirituality, and that is groundinginthespirit.wordpress.com. Again, thank you for watching, and I look forward to the next time. Till then, happy knitting.